is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess, yeah. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess, yes. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I'm crying, I feel like I'm dying.
Alrighty, well, welcome back to Being Human and Other Shit. I am Melissa, and this is Stacy.
I always love the way you say shit and other shit.
And shit.
Sorry.
We're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
So before we get started, we just want to acknowledge that we are here on the ancestral homeland of the Nisenan people. We acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land.
Shit. We're super excited today to have Adriana with us. She is a queer Latin psychotherapist in Sacramento, California, where we live. Well, where I live. Part of the first generation everything. She's passionate about working with the BIPOC community and first generation adults ready to live with authenticity and intention. I knew I was going to cut on that word. So yeah, we're super excited to have you. I was literally just telling her before we started recording that we were like really in search of a LMFT that we, wanted to work with and wanted to record with, and it was like other people didn't work out, and I feel like it's because we're supposed to have you on here. It was totally meant to be.
Universal justice.
Yes. Super excited.
But thank you for letting us, share this space with you in your beautiful office.
This office is dope.
Yeah.
I feel like it really complements our facial features.
We'll see. We'll see how that ends up.
So thank you for doing it, decorating it this way.
But typically how we start, it's just we want it to feel like a conversation because that's really what it is. And there's Stacy and I are just Stacy and I. So we would love if you could just share like your backstory, whatever you're comfortable sharing, your path to becoming an LMFT, and just like any personal paths and experiences you had along the way.
That's a loaded question.
And that's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
Listen, just all those things we just described.
We only have an hour.
Maybe the condensed version.
The condensed version. Yeah. So Adriana Rodriguez, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, which allows me to work with folks in Sacramento in person. I see some folks here in my office. And then throughout California, I have patients, clients that live throughout. And let's see, where do I begin? So I was born and raised in El Salvador, and I was born in the 80s. So if you know anything about the history of El Salvador, we were in the middle of a civil war when I was born. And so I grew up very much impacted by a country that, due to the imperialistic forces of the U.S. and the mess they like to cause everywhere, my country was severely impacted by over 10 years of war. And so what a phenomenon that happened out of that is that a lot of migration started happening. There is Salvadorian populations in Australia and Switzerland, Canada, and the United States. And all of that was due to how unsafe the war really was. And not only safety-wise, physically, there was a whole literal war on the streets, but also a lot of emotional danger, and also just lack of opportunities in general. The country was left destroyed by all these years of conflict. And so in 1990, my parents decided to immigrate, and so they kind of made the decision at that point of seeking asylum. But in order to seek asylum, you kind of have to show up, which is one of the things that people don't understand. The crisis at the border currently is that in order to seek asylum, you have to show up at the border and say, I'm seeking asylum, or cross and then seek asylum, right? And so things were a little bit different in the 90s than they are now. So my parents decided, for many, many complicated reasons that were very, very hard on them, that I better understand now as an adult and especially as a therapist, but as a child was extremely difficult, that that's making me emotional. I didn't even think it would, because I talk about this all the time.
Yeah. We have that effect on people.
Yeah. It's like those things. I'm like, the story. That's what I said. Like, how much? Where do you want me to begin? And so my mom left in 1990, came over. She already had her sisters, and one of her brothers lived in LA, and so she decided to cross the border undocumented, and so she literally was smuggled, was almost kidnapped. Wow. An experience that was I think I know barely the tip of the iceberg, and it's incredibly traumatic, and the biggest, deepest compassion to my mother. In 91, my dad immigrated. So one of the stories that was really interesting is that I understand too that so I grew up Jehovah's Witness. I should add this other layer of
we're always curious of like religious backgrounds.
yeah. My family grew up Jehovah's Witness, which also is just relevant, and I think I'll share a little bit more about that later. And so they, because of their religion, couldn't get involved in the war, right? Like you couldn't join the military, you couldn't join the guerrilla. So a lot of the men at that point were kind of being faced with that sort of decision of it's really unsafe if you're not picking a side. So anyway, that's like a piled up onion of decisions that led for them to immigrate. However, they understood that if they brought me and my sister, I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger than me, that if they brought us over, we were running the risk of being undocumented. And so like, you know, understanding that the opportunities, there's limited opportunities for people who are undocumented, right? Yeah. And so they decided that they were going to leave us behind. And so I was 6, almost 7, and my sister was 2.
Wow.
Oh man, that's hard.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
So we grew up with our grandmother, my dad's mom. My mom's mom was already raising like another 12 children of all the other family members that had gradually left. So we're talking about a whole generation of me and my cousins who grew up without our parents for many, many years. And those things have really impacted us as adults. I believe that is a big part of why I became a therapist. I don't think that when I decided that I wanted to be a therapist, I was as conscious about how I made those decisions. I really thought, I'm just a good listener. I'm just really patient. I'm just like really good with people. AKA I'm an adultified child who had to like parent herself and support her younger sister and kind of deal with adults who were really terrible to us when we were little kids. And so I became really good at being with people, at understanding people, and also at shape shifting almost to create safety, right?
Well,
so
you
like
did that for survival.
And so those are like the very things that like make me an amazing therapist. But at the beginning, like I don't think I used to be able to make those connections. So 9 years go by, and finally my parents' documents go through. Actually 7 years go by, but then my mom has to be kicked out of the U.S. for 2 years so that my dad can prove that he can support us with his one salary, because it's like the whole asylum process. They had sponsors, but at some point the sponsor can't, like the people have to be able to support themselves. So it's a insane, complicated, multi-layer issue, right? As little kids, we were facing the abandonment, the fear, the worry. Are we ever gonna see them again? Are they gonna call? I mean, like, this is also the 90s. Like, we didn't have a telephone at home. Like, this is the 90s in El Salvador. We used to go on Sundays to a neighbor's house and wait until the phone rang. And then hopefully it would be my parents, because other people that also had relatives in the United States were waiting for the same phone call, and this like family that had a telephone. Just as wild to think about.
Children listen to this episode, because
right?
we take for granted everything that we have.
Yeah, we really do.
And so I have this box of letters from being like a 6-year-old little girl that my mom, I guess, collected through like the years of separation, of like me like voicing my concerns, like reassuring them. I mean, like the trauma and the stress that I can like see me as a little girl experiencing. It's something that literally is what led me to this profession. But again, it's like things that I've had to uncover and really piece together through my own healing process, because this was incredibly impactful in my life. So finally, 7 years later, my mom gets kicked out of the U.S., has this like fine of like $20,000. I mean, like, you were asking immigrants to come up with $20,000, be kicked out of the country, and then prove that the one parent who is in the U.S. can support you on top of paying the fine, all of that. So she's out there for 2.5 years. Granted, we had not grown up with a mother. We had seen her once in those 7.5 years. And it was hard. It was hard because at this point I was like 14.
It's like a stranger at that point.
And, you know, it's like 14 that has been like really independent and has been just like running like the streets, but being like a good kid and like protective of my sister. And the joke was always like that I'm like more of my sister's mom than my own mom, but that also like impacted us because it really got in the way of like that sister relationship.
I was gonna say, yeah, do you feel like that's still your relationship, like motherly?
No, I think that it has been hard for me to let it go.
Yeah.
And we struggled a lot with my sister because of it. I think that we're in a better place now. I would say like the best place that we've been because our relationship is more like sisters, but it has required like literally building and destroying boundaries over and over again to finally make sense of what that relationship is like. So very complicated.
I can only imagine.
Oh, it's so hard too because I have siblings that are significantly younger than me, and my mom was a single mom, and we had a lot of responsibility growing up, and it's so, my sister and I specifically had to go through a whole like, you're not my mom phase, you know, whereas like same, making boundaries, breaking boundaries, and me just learning to like shut the fuck up, basically.
Do you feel like being the older sibling, and we don't need to talk like specifically about your sister and what she went through as a teen, but you said you were a fairly good teen. Do you feel like being the older sibling with all of this and having to be motherly, like forced you to not go down a path that it could have gone down, which I mean, you had that freedom, right, to do whatever you want, and so
I fell apart in my 20s.
No, I'm just kidding.
Honestly, my falling apart was in my 20s. I think it was when I finally was like, I'm not responsible for anybody. Like, I can do whatever I can do. And it was a mess. Like, my 20s were a mess.
As they should be.
As they should be. But, you know, it's really complicated because I had gone from being like this, like, perfect little kid that was really compliant, that was like, mature for your years. Like, that is like one of the most hated sentences if I hear it come out of an adult talking about a child. As a therapist now, I'm like, red flag, many red flags. Children should not be older than they are. There's usually a reason why we use that phrase, but it's like encouraging, right? As a kid, you hear it and it's like, oh yeah, like, look at me, I'm responsible
adult.
And all of that. So multi-layer,
I hate when they
right?
say about little kids too, like, you're so strong.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, bitch, I'm 3.
I cringe when like little kids are having to like comfort their parents,
oh
like
my
tiny kids, and I'm like, and the parents that just eat that up, and I'm like, you're training them right now to like be like that.
Or like the parents who, yes, again, I'm big on TikTok, just so you know. Like these videos I see of these like parents, especially with the whole vaccine shit, like going off on people, and the kid, you could see the kid just anxious sitting there, and I'm like bawling, like, you are fucking your child up. What is wrong with you? Like, you know?
Yeah, it's... I've worked with kids like the majority of my life, and it has been like really baffling to, and one of the reasons that I stopped working with children is because unless we're working with the adults simultaneously as we're working with the children,
there's no point.
The progress is just, it is really frustrating, and it's really exhausting for kids to be in those dynamics. So let's see, who am I? So that's part of the story. So then we finally immigrate. My mom and my grandma hate each other. And so then...
Still?
Oh, yeah. And so then that also caused another chaos because when my mom went back, she wanted to reclaim her role as a mom. My grandma is our mom. They have conflict. And so my mom's decision is just to take us away from my grandma, like completely.
And that's the only parent that you've known for
and so,
years.
I mean, it was a mess. I really, I sometimes... And I hear this from a lot of like white folks that become therapists, and like sometimes they're like, that question, I was like, how did you become a therapist? They're like, oh, because I went to therapy. No, like people like me, we never had access to this thing, right? Like even the immense privilege of as a kid to have an opportunity to talk about these things, to name them. I thought that I was a problematic, difficult, rebellious kid. Like that's the identity that then I gained because I was so independent. I was so self-reliant, and then all of a sudden I had now a mom, and then 2 years later a dad who a full macho did not like having a daughter that was outspoken. And then we had religion, right? Because it was like I also grew up very religious, and so I was like very like goody two shoes, but also like this doesn't sound right. And now I'm a Libra and I'm all about justice, and it was just like, oh my gosh, like I needed therapy as a teen, and I did not have it for sure. So that's that. So then we come to the States. I was 16. I lasted 3 years in my home.
That's a long time.
3 years. 19. I was 19. Unfortunately, there was a lot of things that I think they're like still like my dirty laundry that I don't think would be appropriate to share it that led to some of those decisions, but it was really painful. So I was 19, moved out with like $50 in my bank account, which was like super scary, but also preferable than the situation that I was living in my home. So it's like really hard. It was really hard. And so then at some point, you know, I was going to Sac State. I had been in the U.S. for a year and a half, and I used to go to the career center at my high school because I didn't speak enough English to hang out with like English-speaking people. And then the Spanish-speaking kids, I thought they were goofs. I thought, like, what are you doing? Like, you're misbehaving. Oh, no, like, I'm here to learn English and go to
Adriana
school.
Coming out.
Oh, absolutely, right? Like, no fun. I was, like, no fun.
Until your 20s. In your 20s, you
my
were
20s,
real fun.
You
that changed. And
call
so-
all of them in your 20s like, listen, guys, I'm hella fun now.
Super fun. So then, well, I mean, actually, you know, as a joking about that, I think a lot of people that have known me for a long time still have a really hard time with like understanding who I am now, because I am so like free and flowy and like fun and you know, like I'm a comedian, like I love laughing. But if you knew me in those years and then you know me now, like I'm sure it's like a really strange experience because it's not the same to people. So anyway, the career center lady one day was like, do you want to go to college? And I was like, yeah, like sure, like
I sure do.
And so she signed me up for SAT same day acceptance exact state thing. So I went, I took the SATs, like I was very smart. I didn't speak English, but I was extremely smart. Math was always like my thing. So I scored high enough to get same moment acceptance as Sac State. So I got into a 4-year university after only being in the U.S. for a year and a half, about. And cramming.
You're the smartest person in this room.
Yeah, straight up.
And so then that's how I ended up at Sac State. And then being first gen, right? Being now having to deal with like now I have parents. Now is this like strange place. Also, 2 weeks after I started high school here, Columbine happened. And I was like, what is this like horrible place that I've been brought to? Please send me home. Like this is a place that's unsafe. So
That was my
Who
year.
are all
I
these white
graduated high
people
school.
shooting people?
Why are these white people killing everyone?
all of those things are happening. I mean,
scared
it's
every
like
white
it's like telling the story. That's why I said like, where do you want me to start? Because it's a little bit bizarre to think about how I see this meme of like millennials are tired of living through historical events. Like I am tired of living through historical events. Like I am done. Like can I please have peace?
Yes, yeah.
Can we relax?
Yeah, you know, now I relax. Like this is my little safe haven. So anyway, so that led me to Sac State. I got my undergrad in sociology, graduate from this undergrad in sociology, and it's like I went to Google, what do sociologists do? Because it never occurred to me. I entered Sac State as a computer engineering major. I was supposed to be an engineer because I was like goody two shoes and math is like my thing. Thankfully, I failed chemistry and I could not pass chemistry for the life of me. And I had to figure something else out, which was sociology. It's like, oh, like talk about people. I love talking about people. Think about the world. I'm super critical. Like, yes, like this is my... But I graduated and I didn't know what the heck people with sociology degrees did. I never like really thought about it. So then I went on monster.com and somehow it was like nonprofit work, right? And I was like, oh, nonprofits. And I ended up working in mental health. Like got this job as a Spanish speaker, right? Like it's always like highly desirable. Yep. Like that is the one thing that will always get you a job if you're like a fluent Spanish speaker in social services. And so then I got hired at this community clinic and guess what? I was good at listening to like the elderly folks that sounded like my grandma, that sounded like my tias, that sounded like all these grown-ups that all my life I had been cuddling like, are you okay? Like, you know, and so I was really good at it. And my cases started building. And then somebody suggested like, have you ever thought about going to grad school? I was like, oh, you know, maybe at some point. My friend Alicia is applying for grad school and she's getting all these letters signed, like getting from the supervisors, like to get her packet. And she's like, girl, you should apply to grad school. And I was like, sure. And my boss, so then I told my boss, like, hey, like, would you write me a letter? She's like, yeah. And then the other person, like, our other supervisor is like, yeah, I'll write you a letter. So all these people suddenly, write me letters of recommendation. And so I'm putting a grad school packet together, turn it in, like literally the next week it was due. And the next month I was in grad school.
Dude.
Damn. Your path.
You're extraordinary.
So if you ask me, like, how did I become a therapist? Like, at that point, I would have been like, oh, no, it's like magic. Like, this thing just happened. Like, I just, like, say I want to do something, and it happens, right?
Yeah.
Now I understand that I've been highly adaptable, that I have a really high work ethic, that I know how to code switch really well to almost my detriment for a while. Like, I really thought, I was like, oh, like, white people like it when you act white. Like, I could do that.
Makes them comfortable.
Adriana.
Not
like,
all of them.
No. Like, you don't have to say Adriana. It's just like, how would you like to say my name, right? Like, I even still do these things. I did it to you earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's like that accommodating are really the things that have led in so much part to like being really successful and being able to like navigate a lot of systems, because that's what I've been doing all my life. It's like trying to accommodate, to build safety, to feel connected, to feel that I had some sort of value, right? Because if I was of value, then I would be safe. Like, people would want me. People would, create space for me.
I was going to say, like, you fit.
Yeah.
But there's space for you. And so you just had to know that for yourself.
Now I know that.
Yeah.
So then becoming a therapist, it's a whole process. I don't think I understood it. I got burnt out. I lived in San Francisco for a few years, worked with kids in foster care, a lot of Spanish-speaking families, a lot of families impacted by immigration, families that had similar stories to mine, and it burned me out because I hadn't done my work. I was working with people whose distance from my own story was so close that I was getting triggered, and I didn't quite understand it yet as a like baby therapist. I was just like, I just want to help, like give, and I wasn't understanding that I also needed to fill my cup. So the best thing that I like about being specifically a marriage and family therapist, even though like marriage and family can feel a little bit like trapped, binary-ish, and like all these things with the isms, right? But what I really like about it is that as a marriage and family therapist, you're taught to think in systems. That even when a person comes in for therapy with themselves, there's this acknowledgement that you are connected, and that when you sit in that couch that you're sitting right now as the one person, you are bringing in all the people that you have like this invisible strings attached to. So whether you are
family history,
exactly, whether you're coming in for yourself, but you have a partner, that partner is here whether you want him or not. Your family is here whether you want him or not. So this intergenerational and historical trauma, and also the gifts and the healing that comes from being connected with people, is the best part that I love about being a marriage and family therapist specifically, because there are other ways to be a therapist. But for me, something that's really special is to be able to think about everyone that we're connected, including the societal forces, right, and the systems, both of support and oppression that exist, that we're never just quite standing alone. And I think that has been, for me, in my own journey, like the most healing thing to understand, that the things that have happened to me haven't been out of my own bad choices all on their own, or because people have been bad to me. My compassion for my parents and the relationship that we don't have kind of has a different lens. Because when I tell the story, when I was 7, when I think about why they immigrated, when I think about the hard choices that they must have had to make at an age where, like, I don't feel like I'm a full adult, and they were making these hard decisions even at a younger age, leaving their children behind. Like, I cannot imagine, right? So anyway, like, that is like how I got to be a therapist, and kind of where I'm at now. And so the folks that I'm focusing on working right now are actually people that feel a lot like me, that have a lot of experiences like mine, that have families that are like mine. And so I'm working with individuals, with couples, and with adult families. So in individuals, even when people are coming in together, likely is that there's some relational issue at the core, whether the needs are not being met, or they're being overwhelmed by the relationships that they have. And so that's the focus. A lot of the times also understanding how to navigate systems for the first time with the type of support that an immigrant family sometimes doesn't know how to give, or within this parameters of always being like, but back home we did things this way, but here in the US you're expected to do these things, right? Like, and then in couples is the two people coming together, right? If it's intimate partners and it's a couple coming together with their own sets of life experiences, and then they're having this argument, and you think that it is about dishes, or you think it's about the laundry. Oh, no, but we're talking about like my grandma's like trauma, like 40 years ago impacted my mom, who now is telling me that if I wash the dishes, blah, 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 right? So that's like the approach. And most recently working with adult families has been like such a gift to be able to work with people well, and maybe it's like this is my internal wish, because I'm also a person. The wish of like what would happen if my family had an opportunity to talk about all these things that aren't spoken.
Yeah.
And that's the gift that I get to have, like to give as a therapist, to be able to like sit here, and after many years of my own therapy and working through my own stuff, where like helping folks doesn't feel like it's about me, but like really be able to like, okay, this is me, this is how I work through my stuff. Now I can really be of service to others, which is what I wanted to begin with. But really understanding and managing my own triggers, because they still happen, right? Like there's a lot of the people, like I said, the people that feel a lot like me. So anyway, that's kind of like in a very big nutshell.
No, that's exactly.
And how did I get to this moment?
We like to talk about this because it gives, I think, people like they feel more connected to what we're talking about, you know, because otherwise it's just all like professional and shit. That's not what we want. We want to be human and shit.
Well, I think it's important to think about it in the perspective also of why people should come to therapy, right? Like I think that a lot of the times we have been sort of told that only certain people should go to therapy, right? Like there's like all these labels about who should be going to therapy. And while it's true that people with severe mental illness, with severe mental health struggles should have therapy and potentially medication and potentially a team of people that are coming in, the people that I'm working with are just regular old people who are sitting on their couch every day saying, I don't know what I'm doing because I'm caught in between what everybody has told me to do. And now that I have money, time, freedom, and I'm sitting in this couch, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I believe in. I don't know what my values are without having to follow who my family is, right? And so there is kind of these two schools of thought around the purpose of therapy and who should be coming to therapy. And a lot of the people that don't want to come to therapy is because they think there is an association to severe mental illness. And I think my purpose sort of in life and to kind of have these conversations is that therapy and conversations about mental health should be happening as preventative measures before getting to a place where you are needing to lean into like medication and psychiatrists and all of this. Sometimes like we don't get people until that point, but what would happen if people had opportunities to have this type of conversations way before years and years of kind of suffering in silence, right? So that's kind of like the focus of the people that I'm working with right now.
I feel that. I know because I lived that, not to the demographic you're speaking to, but my family didn't really like talk about mental health, and it got to a point to where I did need to go see a psychiatrist and I did need to get on medication, and I was an adult at that point, and so it's like you don't know what to do and you feel very alone, and so it's like having people like you saying it's not just you, it's all of these other things that are contributing to this, and it's not, you know, we hold so much weight on ourselves that like it has nothing to do with us. To your point, it's like all these ties of like a history that we come in with, all the environment that we, you know, grew up in, the culture that we're in. It's just there's all these other things. So just thank you so much for sharing sharing that with the world.
Therapists too are kind of starting to come up, kind of free up ourselves from this like tight bonds of like not sharing who we are. Like I want people to know that I go to therapy, that I not only practice therapy because I believe in it, I go and I value and I find incredible amount of support and healing in my own journey as I'm accompanying people. And it doesn't make me, you know, perhaps like somebody might say like, well, what about if your therapist is going to therapy? Are they adequate enough, right? And we're saying yes, like your therapy actually should be
I actually think it makes you better.
Should be striving to understand themselves so that their stuff is not showing up with you when they're with you, right? Like, you don't have to take care of me. I tell that to my people. It's like, you don't have to take care of me. This is your time. If you're worried about me, they're like, wait, but how are you going to feel if I say it's like, I got therapy tomorrow. Like, I'll get to talk about it. I'll save it for my own therapy. Like, don't worry. Like, you don't have to be worrying about what I'm going through because I'm a person. And so as a person, I'm also have my team of support just like you do, right? And so it becomes like this like chain of just supportive communities with ultimately when we also think about decolonizing mental health, that therapy shouldn't exist. What should exist is communities of support. But because we have so much stigma around talking about feelings, communication, and all of these things, we're finding ourselves having to come to these private spaces to talk about the things that, you know, are like just boiling in our heart. And so what would it be like to kind of start a movement in which people, just regular old people, are opening up and are saying like, hey, I'm struggling. Do you have bandwidth? Can I talk to you about what's going on with me?
Yeah.
Right? With consent.
I'm following you. Start it.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what you all
Seriously.
are doing with this podcast, right?
Yeah.
And with this
That's what we're
series.
trying
of,
to,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely our mission.
how can we start having conversations? Because ideally, I wish that there was no need for therapists, because the purpose that I serve many times is to help somebody make sense of why they don't have a support system. And that's
And dissolve that shame that we
Right.
all carry with it, right? And that's me personally, why I think I didn't even, I am privileged enough to have the resources, and I was in an environment that I knew it was accessible to me, but I still had that shame. So it took me a long time to even get to the point of seeking therapy because of that. And so how many people that actually have, the ability to go to therapy just can't do it because of the shame.
I actually think it was opposite for me. I didn't have the privilege, but I made myself.
Yeah.
Because I think that I knew similar story, with certain things with my life where I was always the dependable, strong one. So for me, it was like, well, I'm watching everybody else's back. Who's watching mine? And then I think, just was, and I say I was born in the 80s. I was 18 in 1999. It was a long time ago. But like, you know what I mean? So for me, it was just like, I knew like I could not go on anymore like this.
Yeah.
So that's why I've been doing therapy since I was 18. I mean, it was 22 years ago. It was a long time ago.
So do you both feel like having the backgrounds that you have and growing up in the families that you did with that like machismo culture, do you like how, I know that we've talked about it with your family a little bit, but like with your family, are they accepting of like therapy, of your path? Are you no?
I am very much the odd one out. And I love my family very much. They're just not ready. I don't know that they will be. I think they're progressing. They're making moves and small moves. I hear about it through the grapevine. I hear that my parents are being amazing grandparents. Sadly, they continue to be terrible parents to me.
Yeah.
And so it's like balancing that. Oh, I'm so happy because this is the work, right? The generational work where they get to be amazing to the next generations.
Yeah.
Just sometimes I still struggle with like, but what about me? Like the acknowledgement that I have been harmed very much by them.
Yeah.
They're because of religion and culture and layers that I just honestly don't think make sense.
Yeah.
They're not accepting of my my sexual orientations. I'm gay. I'm married to a woman.
Yeah.
And they just can't. Like that is the thing. That is the one thing that is unsurvivable in my family.
Yeah.
My family, not only my nuclear family, but my extended family is a family filled with secrets. And being a person who says I do not believe that I need to live my life in secret has been the most like rebellious act of like defiance that could have happened.
Crazy.
And hence I've gotten the worst consequences because people who have done despicable things are welcome at family parties, but I'm not.
We
because
literally talked about that
I'm
last
gay,
week or last episode, didn't we? Or a couple episodes ago,
Yeah.
we were saying that like there's so many families, especially in Hispanic community, a lot in Black culture, like that people will be sitting at the table next to their abuser, and it's just like, be quiet. This, we don't talk about it.
Get
It
over
did-
here, have a beer with me.
Didn't
and it's
happen,
like,
and it's like no, like that's fucked up on so many levels. Like, especially for a little, I mean anybody to go through, but like a child to go through that and just be like, your parents are supposed to protect you.
and then we
it's-
expect these kids to grow up and just like live normal, healthy lives and not.
Yeah,
Have to
it's
think about
insane.
that.
It's insane. Yeah. So clearly your family was not very accepting of your professional path either.
No, I mean, because and I also have to own that at the beginning, right? When I started going to grad school, it was very much like, I'm going to help others. I'm going to help others. But inevitably, when you start thinking and learning about how people's dysfunction starts happening, how all these things kind of connect to each other, you start kind of embarking in your own journey. And I wasn't ready. I became very angry at them. I had lived a life of just ambivalence of like, these things don't feel right, but like, oh well, like that's the path that it was given to me, right? Making the best out of like a bag
Toxic
full of,
positivity.
right, all of
Yeah.
that. And so then I get to grad school and I'm like, wait, I think I've been depressed. Oh, you know that time I got kicked out of Sac State because I had a .97 GPA? Shoot, I think I was depressed.
Yeah.
But I didn't have language at those times, right? So I started going to grad school and started developing language, and I became really angry, and I became very like, where is my apology? And where is this? And where is that? And so I can own that part and also say that I was very valid and being really angry that I still am waiting for apologies that I probably will never get.
Yeah. You've been waiting a long time.
Right, waiting a long time. That's why I go to therapy. But, right, like there's this reluctance to acknowledge. Sometimes I wonder, like, what is it about me? Like, right, because we're like very self-centered. So I'm like, why me? Like, why me? And sometimes I just think that it is my inability to look away from my pain and to say, like, my pain is valid. Our history of trauma impacted us. We have things to heal from that is just too hard for people to bear, because not dealing with the pain is so much easier than dealing with the pain that you're just shoved away somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And that is such a
Absolutely.
conundrum to be in, like to say that I'm the bad person because I keep reminding everybody that we're like a family that has had so much pain. So like let's get better. And
Yeah.
that's like kind
Let's
of like
heal.
what makes me the bad guy, right? Like the bad person. It's really confusing. I've come to a place of acceptance, and genuinely so last year my grandma fell ill, and I got in touch with my parents, and it was just kind of like, see what happens, because it's been a while.
Yeah.
And for the first time in 8 years, I spoke to my dad last week.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
No,
wow.
2 Tuesdays ago, and then last week again. And so I'm like, oh, like, hey, so like grandma's sick, blah, blah, blah. And then like I hung up and I was just like, shoot, like an hour? We spoke for an hour? Like we have not even been able to like face each other
Yeah.
in 8 years.
That's
So, you know, do I have the relationship that I want with them? No. Will I ever get the apologies that, you know, like I might think I deserve? Probably not. But my peace of mind and to be able to just sort of be in touch with them, honestly, it's
Yeah.
so much better than not being in touch with them. And
Yeah.
I think that part of the healing is also and a burden, right? A burden that I have to be like the bigger person constantly, that this is gonna be like my burden to carry my entire life, that I am leading a life of example of healing. And it's good that it's for other people, but it's for me, because I got to the point where like I just couldn't function with the anger and the resentment and the just being on the edge about all these things that were really painful. And so I began working through them, and I can now face them with positivity, but not the toxic kind that is just to cover up, right?
Yeah.
With makeup, like
Yeah.
a bunch
Yeah.
of things that are bruised up underneath. But really just like being like, I see my mom's phone call, even though we're just going to talk about my grandma, and it's very specific, and there's no acknowledgement that I have a wife, that I have a life, that I have nothing.
Yeah.
But I see her name come up, and it makes me like happy that I'm going to hear her voice.
No.
And I was like, hey, Mom. And the 2-3 minutes that we have to exchange conversation about my grandma, it feels genuine, and I think it's doing something for her that I don't know.
I was
she
gonna say, I'm sure
realizes. I don't
she-
know, but I know that talking, even in this like, and I was actually telling my therapist that in a weird way, this is probably the best relationship that I have with them, because it's the most boundaried, respectful, and
Yeah.
honorable sort of our roles in this family. I feel that they're hearing my opinion about what needs to happen with my grandma's care. They're like really leaning into support, and also I am able to say no to certain things that I'm not willing to do. And so it's really weird to say that this like no contact actually has led to a healthier version that
Yeah.
to me, because my door is open, I want them in my life, I miss them tremendously, I love them so much, I honor their pain, and I have the deepest compassion for their experiences, and I know that they haven't chosen to be this way, that there is all these other layers, right? And so my door is always open. And so to kind of sort of lead life in that way because of my own work that I've done, it's so freeing. And I really wish that it's scary to go to therapy. It is a heavy load, and it is a lot of work that sometimes you have to do on your own without seeing very much results.
Yeah.
But man, oh man, the weight off your shoulders, it's like nothing else.
I bet. And it seems like the relationship that you have now that has all the boundaries is just more of an authentic relationship, right? You're showing up exactly as you are, and they walk away however they're going to walk away, but you're getting what you need, and you've set the boundaries for yourself, which is super beautiful. And just you keep talking about having having so much compassion for your parents, and I think that's so important, like to still carry that with you, and that's something you carry around.
And I used to be really angry. I mean, like, don't get me wrong.
Because we can all easily carry on.
I think everybody has to go through that.
But not to be angry, right? There are certain things that I'm angry about. I don't understand how. Like, I don't get it. All of these things, right? I still struggle with them. And at the same time, I'm like, but it's okay. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
It feels okay. It feels okay. This is a better place to be in than ever before. And I know that it is because of the work that I put in, and that I know that the work that one person can do is like a domino that can have impacts in generations to come and heal pain that does not belong even to the generation past, but even goes beyond, right? Because we've all been victimized by systems, religion, imperialism, colonialism, white supremacy. I mean, like, all these things are showing up constantly, right? So, yeah.
I always just think, like, with my own experience of coming out and stuff, I've lost family members, and like Melissa and I talked about that on our episode, and I've always had that attitude of like, fuck it, even though it was a deep pain at one point. You know what I mean? Like, when you lose family or people aren't willing to accept you in the space you're in that moment, because people also forget, like, and not necessarily related to sexuality, but like, I could have went through some type of identity situation 5 years ago, and I'm not that same person now, which I mean I shouldn't have been, but people don't allow people to like go through life and make mistakes and like change your mind, you know what I mean? And without, I think especially family, and that pressure to always be like loyal to the family no matter what, you don't talk back, this is how it is, we know better than you. And then that old bullshit of like time heals all wounds. It's like, I mean, no, I mean, you're just kind of asking me to forget the shit that I'm not going to. This is my boundary. And if you can't meet me where I'm at, then it's not going to work, and you're going to be in my life in a limited space, Yeah.
Well, it's like the past is the past. The past is the past.
My grandma used to say that shit all the time, and I would always be like, no. My grandma is the person I look up to most in my life, and she would always do those little like, you need to let the past go in the past. I'm like, the past keeps coming up and fucking up my head.
Sweeping an under
So
damn rug.
I can't keep pretending like these things didn't happen in my childhood because it's messing me up as an adult. So like, I can't pretend the past is the past. You know what I mean? And I think they're like so much. Our families put that pressure on us, and it's like, no.
I feel like for my own healing journey, which I've been deep in for like the last year and a half.
Deep. 10 days silent deep.
Really deep, but I still like the like, I've been conditioned to still like be the people pleaser, and so like even as I'm going through this healing journey, I'm always like telling my parents, as I'm trying to bring certain things up from my childhood, I'm like doing it in this way that's like, I don't want to offend you. And it's like, I'm just, instead of just letting it process, and instead I'm trying to like sugarcoat it a little bit so that I'm not offending anyone. But it's like, that was my experience. And I need to just like let it come out however it needs to come out. But I keep like battling that with myself where it's like, you don't need to worry about it.
People get offended when you talk about like your shit, and I'm always, when I could tell when I talk, people get like offended about certain stuff, and I'm like, this is me talking about me. Like, this is not you, so you're being selfish. Be quiet. Don't talk to me.
I mean, as I'm sitting here, right? Like, I'm like I'm tapping into my anxiety of being like, shoot, like, should have I shared, like, and again, it is this thing. But
welcome to our lives.
But this is my story.
Yes.
Yeah. And see, this is also the other part, is that like, I carry my pain so well. You would not think that I've struggled.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Yeah. Nobody knows but my wife and my therapist.
Yeah.
Because I've carried it so well because of all the ways that I was, internalized that you don't talk about these hard things, like all the reasons, right? As a little girl that I learned that you just don't talk about these things. And so I'm feeling like I'm tapping into my anxiety right now, being like, I am so anxious about sharing my truth, about who's going to hear that this you know, that I'm a person who has experienced a lot of pain, and like, are they gonna think differently about me? Are they gonna think differently about my family, right? Are they gonna like, oh, what if one of my family members listens to this? Are they gonna be upset? And I think that's still part of like my own journey that I'm going through, like making sense of how I honor my story despite how other people may feel, because not honoring my authentic self led me to a path of just those fun 20s were very destructive. They're very fun, but very destructive, right? Like there were layers underneath that they were being trying to come out, and you know, shutting them down through like really bad behavior that was not healthy for me. And so I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here just thinking about like, wow, like I just talked about this, and like I want to talk about it, and I'm okay with it being like said out loud. And I'm anxious about it, and it's okay, right? And it's just like balancing all at the same time. But I don't think a few years ago I would have been able to. So I'm just kind of sitting with
timing. Everything was timing.
Divine timing.
You were like, it's perfect timing. We made
We were just waiting for Stacey and I in this booming podcast.
This was the moment.
Episode 12.
Episode 12. Yeah, it's crazy just how we always are fighting that, you know, ourselves. We're just constantly, it's this tug of war with ourselves, and it can be exhausting.
Sure, look at how like Melissa was like really struggling before her episode, like, and even after, you know. And same with me. Like I got a lot of pushback on the episode where my brother and I were being very vulnerable about our experience with our dad, and you know, there was a lot of negativity surrounding it, and there's a lot of positivity surrounding it, and I had some people that were like, maybe the people that are being negative are the ones that needed to hear it. And I feel like that instantly like took my anxiety away, because it's like it snapped me back into, not in a place of like ha ha ha, but it put me in a place of like, you know, the people who know me and love me and accept me for who I am today at 39 understand that all those things that I've gone through in my life have made me who I am now. And I'm really proud of who I am. I love myself a lot, you know.
I'm really proud of who you are, and I love you a lot.
But you know, like I think it is very it's anxiety producing when you talk about stuff and then you think back. Even I'll do that in episodes where I'm like, dude, should I have not said that? And it's like, you know what? You're sitting here in your authentic truth with us, and that's like what we want, you know. So
and I love that you said that you love yourself. I think I can finally say that. Like I love myself. All the parts, even the messy ones, are still like working through.
I'm a mess, trust me.
We're all hot messes.
But there is something about like just owning that there is love, you know, where there's been so much rejection and so much pain in the past. And so to give that space to hold.
Well, and it sounds like you get a lot of unconditional love from your wife. You know, having a supportive partner.
I have amazing people. I have my wife. My in-laws are incredible. My sister, like I said, our relationship is in the up and coming, and I am hopeful that it's only just gonna get better. Like we're reaching out these amazing milestones that we get to witness for one another, and I'm just so happy that things are the way they are. And I'm just here reflecting, like, what would it be like to kind of be a little bit more open about this stuff? Because I don't think if you're watching this, you probably don't know a lot about this about me, even if you know me really well, because it feels so private. It feels so private, and so
it's so beautiful that we get to choose to build our own family around us, right? I think that sometimes we carry this obligation. Not that I don't love my family, but we have this like, you know, conditioned obligation to like ignore, to Stacey's point, all the shit that is around us. And it's like you can choose whether or not that's in your life, and if it doesn't fit what feels good for you in your space, it doesn't matter that that's your father or your brother or your uncle or whoever. It's like we're not obligated to have them in our space. We can create our own little family, our own little unit, and we've all done pieces of that, and it feels really good to be able to do that and not have to live in this box.
It's true. So first gen exhaustion.
Expert level.
Expert level.
She's like pretty much everything I just talked about.
So well, did we just cover all of that?
First gen exhaustion is real. It's real. I, you know, somehow I still say somehow as if I don't know exactly how I got to the place that I got.
Somehow, did you listen to the first 45 minutes of this? That's how.
found myself working with first gens, right? And I think it really came out of this gap that I saw as a therapist, where there was a lot of like the emphasis on the symptoms of mental health, right? Anxiety, depression, PTSD, grief, which are real.
Yeah.
But I feel that there is a little bit of the preventative work about exploring where did it come from, where did it begin, right? Like, and more so, how is your pain being manifested through the symptoms that we're diagnosing and that we're putting labels in, right? Like that we're categorizing human pain under this like label of depression, but it's like, but why are you depressed? Like, what is your type of depression flavor look like? Because even though it meets the criteria on the DSM, right, the diagnostic medical system that we have, I'm still interested in like, where does your depression come from? How do you understand your depression? What your relationship is with your depression, right? Anxiety. We give anxiety a really bad rep, but a lot of the work that I do with folks who are first gen is just like your anxiety comes from somewhere. And the more that you improve your relationship with your anxiety, it could actually be really helpful to you as like an alarm system to be watchful to, right? And so improving that relationship. So when it comes to first gen, there is still a lot of work, I think, for all of us first gens into how do we reconcile that we both love, adore, feel supported, have compassion for our family, and that they fucked us up royally.
Yeah. Well, we covered a lot of that with Liz and Sophie's episode. Right. Just that burden of like, I mean, even just down to the like translating phone calls and the burden of like
signing documents.
Yeah, like, growing up, you know, having to do grown up stuff at like a young age because you speak English and your parents don't like. Yeah. So
when we're talking about this burnout, right, it is real. And I think that we have to validate our own experiences. The thing that we have to understand about academia and about the medical model of healing, particularly in the United States, is that it's very driven by insurance companies and what's covered, right? So first gen burnout wouldn't be covered by an insurance, but doesn't make it any less real or any less necessary to weed out and work through and understand, so that then you're not dealing with depression, right? Like it is a messed up method that we wait until the symptoms are alive and showing and causing people's problems for it to be covered by insurance so that you can see a therapist. And so unfortunately capitalism, right, it really sucks because I find myself as a therapist, as a person of color, in this anti-capitalist cycle that I have student loans to pay, I have an office to pay for, I have a life to tend to, and also know that people like me have the least amount of resources and that the therapists that their insurances are offering are crap. Or are overburdened or are overtired because their caseloads are so immense, right? And so it is a sacrifice that people who are first gen have to make, that a lot of the times is about finances. The price of being first gen in capitalism, we don't talk about it enough. I mean, like, we're talking about student loans, we're talking about not having down payments for our homes, we're talking about low financial literacy because our parents as immigrants, they still sometimes don't know how to manage the systems, right? Like, how do I go about my credit? How do I use credit cards? I mean, like, all of these things, there is an incredible capitalist price of being first gen that then also kind of weaves into all of the other experiences of being the first one that has an office job, right? What about if you go to college and you spend all this money and then you get to this corporate job and you hate it? And now you have this pressure, right? Because your family now is looking up to you to make it. It is so many layers. So my emphasis on working on first gen with first gen folks is to give that space for people to give themselves permission. Because I can say in all the Instagram posts in the world that say it's okay to feel your feelings, it's okay to heal, but if you don't feel that it's okay, then it doesn't matter how much positivity you're getting around from all the sources, right? So my hope is that when people can come to my couch and sit in front of me, that they can be received with the energy of a human being, a human, and saying, like, what's bringing you pain? Let's talk about it. Let's make sense of it. Some of it may never like be okay, but can you learn to like tolerate it and live with it? And for it not to be so overwhelming that you're constantly bombarded by it, right? Like, can you, because it's even not about acceptance. We talk about accepting ourselves and accepting this. Like, sometimes it's tolerating. I just need to tolerate that my childhood was traumatic as heck, because if I can't accept it, why would I accept that was something okay for me to happen?
Yeah.
So this experience of being first gen, a lot of the times, is just to give ourselves the permission to name really painful things that we have normalized, that we have internalized as a I problem versus a we problem. And that when we start holding the accountability to the systems, to the stories, to the trauma where it belongs, it feels like a less load to you. And like, that's my hope for first gen, so they can give themselves that permission to say, it is not family bashing. It is not to come and be criticizing my family. It's not disloyalty. It is because I want to understand how my family got here, so that I can make better choices for myself and for the ones that are to come, that I owe it to myself to explore this. And that's the therapy that like excites me, and the people that I like work with and I absolutely love. And that it really takes a whole lot of courage, man, to do this, to unpack it. Yeah. So it's just so honorable. I love it, and I feel so honored, and
I love that.
So something else I wanted to talk about is imposter syndrome, because
I didn't even know what this was.
I told her, I was like, that's me.
I was like, what the hell is imposter syndrome?
I've struggled with that, and I think part of that is probably my anxieties and stuff, but you deal with that a lot, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question. Is it imposter syndrome, or is it sexism, racism, white supremacy telling you don't belong? I mean, because there is one thing, right? Like, this is also about how much societally we are made to think that is an I problem. Saying I have imposter syndrome ignores the fact that you probably have heard that people like you shouldn't be doing the things that you're doing to begin with.
That's like
you
just shine like a huge light on it too, because
she's like, oh shit.
Well, it's like we were just talking last night. I was like, as a queer woman, in the position I'm in, like, me being white has probably got and straight passing, I guess, or straight assuming is the verbiage you use, is I think earned me certain accolades that I may not have gotten if I didn't look the way I look, and passed for something else that was fitting in a box that somebody put out for me. And so that's frustrating. And so you just shined a light on that. Like, is it imposter syndrome, or is it just like what I've been kind of led to believe?
The thing is that the axis of oppression, right, is that we all carry some type of privileges. I am a queer immigrant woman, right, with first gen, with all these experiences. By all means, I have intersections of oppression all over the place, but I'm also highly educated. I'm a business owner. I have money saved in my bank account. I have stability in housing. So we're always kind of playing in both between that line of our oppression and also our privileges, right? And so when we're thinking about imposter syndrome, it is likely that those oppressed identities are really just talking from that place of hurt, of saying, like, there's been so many times where I haven't felt that I belong, and people made it a me problem. Oh, it's lack of confidence. Like, you don't have enough internal, like, acumen to, like, believe in yourself. No, we hear it everywhere that we like, people like us shouldn't be having this type of conversations and like empowering one another to say, like, F this. It is not imposter syndrome. It's society that's made me believe that I'm not good enough, and I need to unpack it and understand it, so then I can say, like, oh, it's not a me problem, it's a you problem. Let me go do my damn podcast. Like, right? But it is like we have internalized these messages, and because the oppression is real, and because we kind of stand in those things, it's like, what part, right? I always kind of think about it when my anxiety shows up, when my depression shows up, when my grief shows up, when whatever is showing up, when I lean with it into it with curiosity, and I say, like, what is this trying to tell me? What part of me may be needing to be nurtured right now? Right? When my imposter syndrome shows up, what may be needing to be nurtured? Oh, it is that little girl that when, she came out, she was told, like, queer people have it harder in life. So why wouldn't this be harder for you, right? Yeah. So we've internalized all this messaging. And so if we lean into it, one, with curiosity, but also with this desire to nurture our inner selves and like our younger selves who are screaming sometimes inside, like, well, like, I don't know what's happening. I'm just overwhelmed. And we tend to it and we give ourselves exactly what we need. You know, is it really imposter syndrome? Right?
Yeah.
I feel like I just
agree.
got a session
I know.
from you. Thank you.
You healed her. You healed her.
You're welcome.
You're 10 days of silence in you.
See, this is what happens in therapy.
Everyone needs to go to therapy.
Yeah. No, I agree with all that. I do think too,
Awesome.
I've been really into a lot of the like inner child work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is crazy, just like, you know, you start with the like therapy 101 where it's like, what's behind the anger is like feeling a rejection, abandonment, all this shit. And like, I always am exploring that because I have all those things. It's like, I'm like the bubble thing. I'm like checking. Yes. I have all those issues. So I think the inner child stuff and feeling safe, like a lot of what I've been exploring with like my healer and even my therapist is my defense mechanism is like, I'm tough. Like I'm tough. Like I will mentally, physically, emotionally, I'm stronger than you. I was like the fighter tough girl in high school, and that was my defense mechanism. You know, so a lot of that was like I was in survival mode as a kid and you know, had to be tough for other people. So a lot of that inner child work, like I love that. Like telling your person like it's okay to be scared or like that inner child, you know?
Yeah. Well, when I went to the Vipassana, I just did a 10-day meditation retreat, and something that kept coming up for me was like how I was thinking of Stacy's too, because we have all little nieces and nephews, and it's like the trauma and stuff that they go through really young. It's like, how do we still expect them to like choose happiness, choose joy, and navigate through that? And so that like kept surfacing for me, and it's just giving them the tools and having those conversations that weren't had with us. As much as I love my parents, those conversations were not had with me. When I was dealing with anxiety and having to breathe in a bag before my basketball game, like it was just she's nervous about the game, and it's like, no, there's something like underlying going on there. So it's just like, from your perspective, like what is it that, how do we choose joy in moments of, I know that's heavy and you probably don't have like the light, but like,
I was
how
like, damn, if you have the answer to this question.
You heard it here on episode 12.
Yeah.
But how do we choose joy and like in finding space for it, even in those moments of, you know, distress? And
that's an interesting question. You know, I was thinking about first when you say choose, right? That kept coming up for you. And my thought was like, can we really choose, right? Like, can we, is there such a thing? And so this is what's coming up for me. I think I like living from a place of hope. I know that even in the worst moments of life, there's been hope that there would be something better, even when I didn't know what that better was. And sometimes the better has been like from here to here. But I don't know if you can choose happy, because happy is also kind of like subjective. You know, what is happy?
Yeah.
And then we're going to go into the whole existential thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is happy? So the way that I approach it is more about like, am I living from hope? Am I living from fear? Am I allowing the fear of the past repeating itself and the pain being, you know, showing up again, or my old wounds being rewounded, right? Am I living with that fear constantly? And so then I'm anxious or really depressed or really sad about it, right? I'm constantly grieving. And as I'm working through that, can I find space for hope that even if I don't know where I'm going, I'm moving forward? Because we all are, right? Even when we're feeling stagnant, the fact that you can recognize that you're stagnant, it is something to hope for, because at some point you didn't know that you were stagnant, right? So I don't know, that's what's coming up for me more so. No, like about
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
That is perfect, because I think that is one like thing that I am proud of, is I do have kind of a little bit of like blind optimism, if you want, you know. So I think that
she's always positive, and like
I'm not always positive, but like I think that it's important that we do have that faith and that hope. It was just I want us to figure out how to get these young tools in like kids' hands too.
Yeah, that's the one thing I feel like always kind of talk about is like the tools.
But then to your point earlier, if you're not addressing it with the adults, then it's like, what's the point?
I got into working with children with the same ideal, right? Like I'm gonna help others. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that preventative services should and have to start before people have children.
Oof. Girl,
Preventative,
say it for the people in the back.
Preventative services.
That's exactly why we don't have kids. No, I'm just kidding.
I've worked with, I actually specialized for a while in 0 to 5. I was working with like babies that had trauma from like birth and or DV situations, right? And working with parents, caring parents, non-caring parents with this like little ones. And I work with kindergartners, and I've taught them how to breathe and how to meditate and how to like eat mindfully and play mindfully and how to be kind and how to be loving. But as long as those kiddos are going back to homes where the grown-ups are not doing their work, it's going to be really tough. I still feel hopeful for them, and I know that they're little breathing. In and out, Mrs. Rodriguez. Up the mountain, down the hill, right? Like rainbow breathing, all the things that I've taught them. I know they mean something, but what I really want is to get parents to do the work.
It's so hard. Like I deal with that shit on a daily basis. I have my credential is in early childhood, and I'm an early childhood special education teacher, and it's so hard because I feel like the same way a lot of the time where you're just pounding your head against the wall. Like I need you to be on the team with me. I can't have your kid for 3 hours
and fix all the world's problems
and fix everything. I can only be like you could like tag me in for 3 hours a day and we could be on the same page, but it's challenging. I love working with kids. It's so rewarding, but it's really hard. It's really hard.
In my last job that I just left working with middle schoolers, that was my last. Absolutely. No. I absolutely love middle schoolers. Middle schoolers are the coolest because they're still young enough to be playful and to be silly. They don't want to, but like once they trust you, they're like literally kindergartners. But they have verbal and communication skills now to actually express what they're going through, and they're not inhibited like high schoolers where they're like now too cool to talk about it. So middle schoolers actually,
you catch them right at the right
they're
time.
Like really special. And one of the things that I was dealing with a lot was suicide, right? And nobody wants to hear the middle schoolers want to die, but a lot of them do. A lot of them do, and it's really tough. And so we think about suicide prevention, right? And we have Suicide Prevention Month, and we have posters, and we have this. But suicide prevention is stable housing. Suicide prevention is safe homes where domestic violence is not happening. Suicide prevention is stable income for families to not be overworked and to be available for their children. I mean, the schools and the therapists, we're trying to help families, right? With this like moments that we get with them to really address all these inequities that are spanning across, and it's just not enough. Right? And even getting a parent into therapy, if a parent doesn't have housing, doesn't have job, doesn't have food security, doesn't have documentation to be able to like drive and drop off their children to the school or take them to the doctor. I mean, like that's suicide prevention. Kids that are in those very difficult situations are there because they are expressing the pain of a family, and they're expressing the pain that a family has of the needs that are met around them many times. Or the kiddos that just, are dealing with some more biological stressors and things like that. Absolutely. But in a good majority of the cases, it's like the kiddo that is coming up and saying, Ms. Rodriguez, like, I want to die. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. When you really start digging, right? And it's messed up because our protocols is to call 911, to take them to the hospital, to do this. But what if we, right, sit down, and I've had these amazing conversations with the parents, and as we're having to do all this legal and ethical sort of mandates, I am also working with the family and saying, what can we do to help stabilize, right? Like some of the things that are kind of chronically going on that have led to this moment. And it's really eye-opening to know that if a child kind of finds himself in this position, it's they're just showing this larger pain and this larger ways that we're failing families as a society by under supporting them. And, you know, but then mental health or, you know, IEPs, or we talk about individualized. And what we're needing is community care. We're needing to take care of families.
Yeah.
And there just isn't enough resources.
There's not. There really isn't. It's so funny
Let's
because
fix this problem. Ladies.
Yeah, guys, let's do this together.
I'll follow you anywhere.
Powerpuff Girls on Bubbles. One of the things, like recently, I actually asked. I've gotten a little bit more responsibility in my job, and I asked, like, hey, you know, we have some families. I'm in a pretty urban district, and I said, you know, what about doing like a donation box? And it's like, well, it's real sensitive. People get really offended by stuff. And it's like, there's also times when it's like, you could have these good intentions. You do want to help. And some people are too proud to take them. You know, it's like, I appreciate that about my mom. She was in food bank line. She did what she had to do to like support us. But I also get like, that was probably really embarrassing for her, you know, and really like, she wasn't, you know, growing up, she was like they're a middle class family. And my mom kind of, you know, until she educated herself, was really struggling. And so it's hard because it's also too, like my point, you want to help people, and sometimes people don't want that help. They're too proud, you know.
And also there's a lot of shame and stigma, right?
Yeah.
We started kind of this conversation talking about the shame and stigma of mental health, but we're talking about shame and stigma of saying, I need help.
Yeah.
I am struggling.
Yeah.
I don't know where to get resources, right? And what does it take is relationship building. The hardest thing for me to leave my job, to come and do this other work that I absolutely love, and I know I'm creating an impact, is knowing that there are families now that don't have access to a person like me because I'm not there, right? And so another passion of mine is now teaching in the graduate school programs. I've had the opportunity to get into that realm because we need more people doing this work that are knowing how to build positive relationships that are not about saviorism and saving people. We're not going to save anybody, but can we be companions in somebody's journey to say like, oh, I know something for that. I can support you this way. Oh, have you thought about it this way, right? Because that's another part of social services too, that there is this shame about, you know, kind of thinking that somebody is going to save you or that somebody is going to do. No matter how poor a family is, no matter what kind of neighborhood we're in, people have resources and people have community, and we don't sometimes value as professionals. We can kind of fall into that really big mistake of underestimating the community and the support that families do have when they come together.
Yeah.
But this society, particularly in the US, right, with individualism, we are not accustomed of coming together to support one another as a community. And so I go back to, what do we need? Is it more suicide prevention posters? Yeah, we need that. But what we need is real community care where we're saying, hey, like, I can help you. I have something that perhaps can support you, or I know somebody, right? And so what if like all of us kind of did that and started talking about mental health and started talking about food scarcity, started talking about, hey, like what happens when somebody doesn't have enough to make rent? Can like somebody pitch in $5?
Yeah.
And what if 50 people pitch in like $10, right? That's the type of stuff of community care that this individualistic society that we live in here in the US, that is so different than a big part of the global majority, where people are living in communities, where we're living in multi-generational families, taking care of each other, right? And what has happened here is that we've created a system in which people are not feeling that it's okay to ask for help, right? And we've also internalized that by not talking about what's going on with us.
And I think you nailed it. I talked about it on one of our episodes too, is that saviorism versus shame too. So it's like you're either on the shame side or you're like trying to be a hero, and it's like, can we just meet in the middle somewhere?
Yeah,
like,
it's hard. It's hard though.
And when we other poverty, right? When we other poverty and struggle as something that happens in those neighborhoods and people over there that look that way, right? Like, no, like, do we know how much $1 billion? We're poor.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast, we're sitting here, we're poor. We don't not. $1 billion is a ton of money. I mean, like, we're talking about, we have internalized othering the struggle as if it's something that happens to other people over there, as if like an accident couldn't leave us all vulnerable
Yes.
and
Yeah.
on the
I've
verge
thought about
of
that
like
many
losing
times.
everything, right?
Yeah.
But it's like we sort of fool ourselves into thinking, or like, oh, I live in a different zip code now. I go to, my kids can go to these schools
safe.
now, so I am safe. And others, right? And no, like, this is community. We need each other because
Yeah.
we're all in the brink. Unless you got $1 billion in the bank, like, we're all on the brink.
I do not have $1 billion in the bank.
So we're poor.
We broke.
Money in the bank. Show me what you do.
What you want.
Yeah,
You know what
it's
I'm saying?
true.
It's like this community care is something that I really am passionate about talking as well. Because it is, people, I wish that people didn't need somebody like me, that they had a community that they could go to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what if more of us started doing like those little things to create community with the people that we have around us? And then if we have a little extra, to extend it out to people that are not around us, right? I feel hopeful.
I think
do
that's
too.
a really
And
good
you've
way.
Gotten me even more helpful. But that's
You know
that's,
who's that for us is my cousin Joey.
yeah.
And Chanel. They always create community for us.
Yeah, and I think that's also why I'm so drawn to start the wave too, because it's just these little grassroots like
When it's
initiatives.
inclusive,
Yeah.
which is nice. It's a really inclusive organization. Going into talking about inclusivity just for like time's sake. Sorry, we can literally talk for 2 hours. Do you think that like therapy is inclusive to people with like, I mean, I think mental disabilities, yeah, but like physical, specifically physical.
So yes and no.
Yeah.
I think that it is impossible to be truly 100% inclusive, right? Because I do not speak all the languages in the world.
Yeah.
I do not have an ASL interpreter here.
Yeah.
I do not have space that is safe for children. So it would be impossible to say that one therapist can be inclusive for everything. But oh wow, like, are we trying to be inclusive in the ways that we can?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? From choosing offices that don't need an elevator, or that somebody with a wheelchair could come in. I flipped my door because it wasn't wheelchair accessible, and I demanded from my landlord, right, to like flip
Yeah.
it. And you would think that is not a big deal, but it was a big
think it would
deal
have
to
already
me.
been that way.
Yeah.
You would think that it would be that way. So, I think that there is a lot of not only the stigma, but also how hard it is to pair up with a therapist that is a good fit for you. And just like in every relationship, not every therapist is going to be the right therapist for you. And I just hope people wouldn't get discouraged.
Yeah.
And that they would keep trying to find the therapist that is going to be right for them, because we are out there. I am really encouraged by the wave of BIPOC queer therapists that we're saying we're here, we're taking space. We're no longer just kind of quieting down behind our white peers and saying like, oh, just only this type of people go to you. It's like, no, like, we're becoming open and accessible and telling our stories. And so if somebody has had an experience where they didn't feel that their therapist could meet their personal needs, that were around inclusivity for what they were seeking, I know that there is somebody out there that would and that can. It's just it takes a little bit of hard work, and I wish it didn't, but that's where we're at now, just realistically.
Yeah. I mean, I like that you say that, because I feel like having a connection with your therapist is so important. I feel like we've said that multiple. I've been through so many therapists, and some it's like you mentioned earlier with like the insurance provided therapist. That's who I go to, and she's working for the time. But like, there's been many people that I've heard, and even in my family, that they've gone to insurance provided therapists, and it's like, it just doesn't work. They're overworked. It's it's challenging. So yeah, I love that you
The
say
other thing
that.
too is like making sure people know that a therapist isn't like the fixer. People have to do take the time, do the work, and it's hard, and it never ends. It's like, it's a constant, just like you were saying earlier, like, it's exercise, it's eating, like, it's part of your routine for a healthy lifestyle, and it's preventative care, right? Us eating healthy and us exercising sometimes is part of that is part of that healthy lifestyle. And so I think if you have any last like words to share with people about psychotherapy, please.
Let's see. One of the things that we do as therapists when you first start working with somebody is what is called informed consent. Those forms that you read at the beginning and you sign very hastily because you're just ready to jump in. But there is something in the informed consent that says therapy does not guarantee positive outcomes, or like the outcomes that you imagine as positive. Sometimes therapy can make you have a breakup. Therapy can make you make a decision of putting a boundary with somebody you don't want to put a boundary in, but that is kind of what's shown up in therapy, right? And so in this informed consent is, to me, is really important to have people understand that the process of therapy is dynamic and that you may get things that you didn't even expect, but that's not always a bad or a good thing. It just is, right? And so that therapy takes time. That, or maybe other therapists will call me out on this number, but it's like 40% of the likelihood that you're gonna have a positive outcome in therapy is your relationship with your therapist. Like that, to your point, right? Like you have the lived experience with that, but there's actually research that backs that up. That it's not the approach, it's not how pretty their office is. My office is really pretty.
It is all of that.
But that it is actually the relationship, right? And so if you find a therapist and that is not a good fit and it doesn't feel good, one, give it a shot, give it a good shot, because it is awkward. You're coming to talk to a stranger about something that is really personal. So sometimes it may be like, oh, that's not the right therapist for me. Is it? Or are you just not ready to talk about what you want to talk about? Right? So there's that part. But if after you giving it a fair shot, it still doesn't feel like the right fit, or the outcomes that you're getting aren't what you expected to get, it perhaps would have to be because the things that in your awareness you thought you needed aren't the actual things that, you know, are coming up. And that's not the therapist's fault necessarily, but what's showing up with the work, right? So give it a fair shot. It's hard work. It's commitment. It's expensive. Sometimes, right, if you can get a good therapist through insurance, lucky you. Like, many people are not able to, but if you are good, like, you know, do it. But also, like, I've had to make adjustments financially to be able to pay for my therapy. It is a monthly expense that I have accounted for in my budget because it's good for my mental health. And I would rather do that than other things, right? Some other people choose other things. For me, it's like my therapy is budgeted in my month to month to month. So it's a process. And we don't have all the answers. If anything, like therapy, like a lot of people think that therapy is about giving advice. I don't ever give advice. That's not my job. My job is to help you discover as a bystander, as a neutral outsider of your lived experience, what path are you taking? And to lean with it with curiosity and to kind of point out things that because you're deep in it, you may not be aware of. And to just say like, oh, like, I wonder about this. What do you think? Oh, shoot, I hadn't thought about that. And that's the process of, you know, therapy. But it can be like, it's really abstract. It's really like, well, tell me about that. Like, how do you feel? That is like really like kind of like a joke.
You did that
like
to
a
me
joke
earlier, by the way. This imposter syndrome.
Ruining a pretty office.
It's like, oh, you have a question? Let me ask you a question. What about that? Right? And so that can be like really awkward because people may think that the more that the therapist, like if I give you an answer, I think I may actually be robbing you from the experience of getting to your answer, right? And so it's like, some people get frustrated that their therapist won't give them advice. So anyway, that, like, it's a last
I'm a therapist,
like,
not a psychic.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, it'd be really cool. It would like save us a lot of, like, that's not what they mean, but we'll wait. Right?
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Like, they're not ready. But it's a process and it's like strange and you know, give it a shot. Try it out. It's really cool.
Okay, plug all your stuff.
Oh, Adriana Rodriguez Therapy on Instagram. That's also my website. And I'm just like in Sacramento. I do a lot of like speaking stuff in the Sacramento area. Also, if you want to like, you know, I do a lot of partnerships with other people that are doing really cool stuff that believe in the same things that I do. And so if you want to collab or like have an idea of something we could do together, like hit me up. Like,
I also think that you should offer some decorating because this office is bomb.
She has a side hustle to pay for her monthly therapy bill.
Dude, and aesthetically, your Instagram is like so pretty too.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah,
Thank you so much for again sharing this
seriously.
space, and I look forward to doing some more community things with you in the future. So
let's get this community started.
Community care.
There might be some cussing.
Yeah, it's gonna come with a little wretchedness, but that's okay.
No, I wouldn't expect anything less than that. But thank you so much.
Thank you both.
A beautiful mess. Yes, life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess.